Well, hello there and welcome back to the studio today. So we are back in the studio today. We're using titanium white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, though you could also use alizarin crimson, cadmium red, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. So for the photo reference that we're using today, I am using the copyright-free site once again, named Pexels. So you'll have that image in the top left corner of your screen. If you're interested in seeing some of the previous photo references from previous videos, feel free to scroll down to the description box down below, and I'll have some resources to previous photo references that have been used in the past. So I'll be starting with our burnt umber. I use a little bit of odorless mineral spirits directly beneath the camera shot here, so whenever you see me reaching down below, it's because I'm using the odorless mineral spirits. So we're working on a sheet of cotton canvas. This was supposed to be around 8 by 10 inches, but I kind of messed up in the corner here, but it's okay. It's taped onto the surface, so it shouldn't go anywhere. We're using burnt umber as our drawing color, and I think with today's episode, what I'm going to do is focus a little more into color. I've been a little more, I guess, holistic, if that's even the right word to use, with my demonstrations recently. So I've been doing a lot of paint-alongs, which this is, in fact, a paint-along style episode. Let me adjust the autofocus. So yes, this is a paint-along style episode. Those of you that are new to this channel, I highly encourage you to follow along with this video. Keep this on, draw with me, paint with me. Let me be your studio friend, a little voice in the corner there, guiding you as you create your artwork. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just placing the head. As you're seeing the photo reference in the top left corner there, I'm not doing any kind of tracing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm not really going to be, going for a picture perfect drawing, nor am I going to draw the hand. And for those of you that are following me on Instagram as well, you may recognize this this image, or at least the face, because I think that's all you're seeing there. It is an image from one of my studio paintings. So I'm currently working on a studio painting involving more of what's seen on this photo reference. So again, one of you asked me on Instagram if I had filmed that studio painting, and I felt really bad that I didn't film it because it was one of my off-camera studio paintings. So if you want to check out the larger painting that I'm working on, excuse me, the larger painting I'm working on of this same reference, it's on Instagram. I also painted the hand. I don't think I'm going to paint the hand. I'm sure you can see some glimpses of it in the photo reference. I'm not going to paint the hand because that would take a little bit longer than your standard paint along. So now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, I think that this is a pretty good dimension for the size of the head. So it's I don't want it to be too tiny. It's about the size of my hand almost. I don't want to paint anything too small, because the smaller it is, the harder, at least in my opinion, the harder it is to see any mistakes. So now I'm gonna focus on color, and we've already passed the 3-minute mark with the episode, so I'm going to proceed to continue with the umber sketch. This is the burnt umber sketch that you see me do in pretty much all of the starts to my portrait painting demonstrations. So we have the axes for the eyebrows, and now we're going to go down and put the mark for the nose. And I'm using a little bit of mineral spirits with the burnt umber oil paint to allow me to, make marks with a little more facility. Now we're going to put a little mark here for the eyes. Axes here for the eyes. I don't aim at getting the perfect proportions. I don't try to perfectly copy what I'm looking at. Rather, I'm trying to trust my eyes and, put in information that I can work with. So, for example, each area is subdivided into simple shapes, simple straight lines and angles that can be modified when we get into color. And as I was saying, this is going to be more about color, so we're going to introduce and edit very soon. I can do videos on the future, although I've pretty much covered most of the topics I can think of. But I can also do another video in the future that talks more about drawing with paint, though I think I have a video literally titled that. But don't worry, I can also cover those drawing topics as I'm kind of flying through drawing a little bit. So now I'm going to introduce my first edit, and then once we get back into painting, which will be in the blink of an eye for you, we'll start to mix the flesh colors. Ta-da! So now we just did the little edit. So as you can see, I didn't really do too much, okay? I didn't really go and draw too much of the accurate, accurate pencil, finite type of linear drawing. I didn't do that. With the burnt umber, especially with this approach, the alla prima approach, I don't really aim at getting the perfect block in. That would be for more of a classical style approach. But anyway, now let's get into the main topic of this episode, which is going to be color, in particular flesh color. So there are quite a bunch of colors here and a few that we don't actually need for flesh colors. So the few colors that you don't really need for flesh color at this point, you don't need ultramarine blue, you don't need sap green quite as much. So from the colors I listed, also feel free to check the description box down below where I also have the colors typed out for you along with some Amazon affiliate links. So I'm going to start this very step by step. As you see, only two colors right now, titanium white and yellow ochre. Alright, so titanium white yellow ochre creates a very basic type of yellowish, you know what, let's get crazy today. I want to zoom you in here. I apologize for the motion of the camera. But anyway, now that you're zoomed in here, titanium white yellow ochre creates a really nice highlight for most flesh colors. Sometimes you can make it a little bit cooler if you introduce the burnt umber, but for now this would be a really good highlight type color. Now I'm gonna mix another value just to drop down value down, so see how I'm going down with the values, and this is the start of what I call the color value web. And what it is an organization of values on the palette. Value just means how light or how dark something is. So this is lighter, this is darker. So we just moved one value down. And the chroma is also changing. See how this is a little too pink, this is a little too cotton candy. So this is when you mix titanium white, cadmium red, yellow ochre. Now I'm giving you this simplest flesh color combination that is usable. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of ivory black. A little bit of ivory black will help to cool down the intensity of that cotton candy looking pink. Tiny bit more ivory black. So that helps to bring down the intensity. Remember the two colors that I said you didn't quite need was the sap green and the ultramarine blue. Now if you have them at your disposal, I would definitely use them, the sap green and the ultramarine blue. They just make life a little bit easier. But for those of you that are just getting into painting, I'm just letting you know so you don't have to break the bank right away and purchase every single color. You have a way to kind of build into your colors. So now we're mixing with the burnt umber that was on the palette. See how this is a little bit too gold ochre. Let's move this. See, it's a little too golden ochre. It's almost like I don't know, like a type of mustard type of color. So what you want to do is now access a more transparent red, so that's the alizarin permanent, and wait for it. Yes, I did say that sap green wasn't that necessary, but if you have it, it's a nice color to have. Sap green and alizarin permanent are two colors that are practically made for each other. See how the sap green kind of helps to bring down the intensity of the cadmium red. Now a little bit more titanium white, and titanium white can now act as a coolant as well as something that can bring the value up a little bit more. Now as we get darker into the middle tones, I'm just going to have a little more burnt umber, and this is how I go ahead and begin the color value web. I'm just going to add one more value to the color value web, get the camera angle back to normal. Excuse all the motion here with the camera, but anyway, there you go. Now we're going to get the burnt umber, alizarin permanent, and that was your little tutorial on a quick and simple explanation of flesh color. But now we're going to put theory into practice. Let's go ahead and put our darkest dark down first. We can get a little darker than that, so more ivory black, alizarin permanent. Now that is a really dark color, so let's do that again. There, now we have our darkest dark. You don't want to use it everywhere. Remember in the beginning, see how this is kind of runny? That's because I toned straight up cotton canvas. Let me adjust the autofocus for you. So I toned this about 20 minutes before starting the episode, and the mineral spirits kind of helps the paint just settle into the canvas a little bit. So now using some more of the dark, we just want to have something indicated there for the darker darks. Don't worry, we'll get into the specifics of the hair and all of that stuff later. I just want to have the darkest darks pretty much settled right away before I get into too much flesh color. Now the next thing I'll do is move up. Now we're going to start to move towards the face. So using the same color, I'm adding just a little bit of the cadmium red and the sap green. So now we're going to go ahead and paint in a value for the cast shadow. Excuse me, this is a form shadow. The shadow on the form is a form shadow. But don't worry too much about the definitions. What matters is the value and the shape, and knowing how to work with the value and the shape. Just for future reference, cast shadow is a shadow that's projected. So suppose the shadow that's directly casted onto the canvas, this little shadow here, that's a cast shadow. The shadow resting on the form of, say, my hand, like the shadow that you see over here, that's a form shadow because it's a shadow that rests on the form. But in any case, now let's get into the angle of the mandible, somewhat like this. So it depends on the tone of the canvas, but usually if I have a lighter tone like this one, then I'll probably go in and try to assess my darkest darks first. Now then, let's go back to the lighter flesh colors, and now I'm just going to use a base flesh tone, so kind of like a primer to a wall or something like that. It's just the first coat that I'm going to put, and since we're using the alla prima approach, so that means we're going to be painting wet on wet. I'm not using my fast matte titanium white, I'm just using regular old titanium white. I'm not using a speed dryer medium, so whenever I do use a medium, I'll let you know, but for now I don't have any medium. I'm painting as thick as I possibly can, and I'm going to stay focused on the main triangle, so a little more alizarin permanent here. So we're going to be working with values, and that's the major lesson that you would want to keep in mind now that we're going from the theoretical realm here, from mixing colors, to actually working with them on a portrait painting. Now this is the alla prima approach to portrait painting. For those of you that are new to this channel, alla prima just means painting wet on wet. It's kind of like the fast and furious way of creating a painting, if you ask me, in that it gets results really fast, but things can go wrong really bad in alla prima, so it can be very challenging to draw with alla prima, and we are going to go through a pretty heavy awkward stage when we get into the middle tones and all of that. Right now it's just a base coat for the flesh, and I'm going to create another coat for the background color. So I'm going to just mix over here a little bit of mineral spirits. So for the background, I'm just going to use burnt umber and alizarin permanent. I used a more bright pink color for the studio painting that you saw on Instagram, but for this one I'm just gonna go basic dark red. I am aware that there's a pretty heavy glare on the painting, but that really just depends on the angle that the canvas is making with respect to the light. So hopefully that brought down the glare a little bit, but usually the glare will kind of settle eventually. So I just want this very clean division with the background. And the beginning of these paintings is always, it's always a journey, really. You kind of have to have faith in your drawing, your linear drawing ability. So that's why I usually recommend having some experience with portrait drawing with just pencil and paper before, you know, attempting at least an alla prima portrait. But any experience is good experience. So, you know, even if you don't have too much experience with portrait drawing and you want to paint, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Just paint. Don't even think about it. Just paint. What's the worst that's going to happen? It's just a painting. It's not going to come out and attack you. It's a fun process too, the alla prima approach. It's like the Wild West, really, when it comes to painting. So much can happen in such a short amount of time. It's incredibly fun. Now, I have 3 brushes going on right now. I have a dark brush, light brush, middle tone brush. So now I'm going to use the middle tone brush in the middle tones. So I'm going to put a little mark here for the concavity of the eye socket. Remember, this is kind of like the reddish, yellow ochre-ish, sap green, alizarin permanent-ish type of mixture. Not a very complicated color, but still pretty useful when it comes to the drawing. And what I'm going to do with today's episode, it is a paint along, of course, but I will do some edits. So I'm going to introduce these major planes to you, and then I'll do an edit. So I'll sync these planes into one another and do the edit so that you don't have to see all the mundane stuff. And then maybe in another episode, if you want to see the more mundane stuff, then I'll make an episode about that. But for now, what matters is the main triangle, and getting the main triangle into a type of workable, like sculpture-like position, if that makes any sense. Getting this to read in 3 dimensions as planes. Remember, a plane is just a 3-dimensional construct of a flat surface in space. That's all it is. No more complicated than that. No calculus, no linear algebra, no differential equations needed for this. Just good old paint and drawing. And a little more light under here. So think of this as the scaffolding. And this is how we're going to draw with values. I'm very mindful of these angles. And very cautious with the outside contours. Now, as this is a paint along, so I am painting and talking at the same time, there will be moments, such as now, where my talking will slow down. So that's why I'm saying I highly suggest you have this video playing in the background at home or in your studio. Just have me as a studio friend. We can hang out, paint some portraits together. A little more cadmium red. You know, my latest kind of epiphany with portrait painting in particular is with the cheekbone, with the mandible. I messed up in my studio painting. I had too much of a value transition precisely here for the side of the cheekbone. And lately, what I've been doing with the cheekbone is instead of using a straight up value change for the cheekbone, I actually will do a chroma change. So I'll make this a little warmer to make it look like it's a different value, to make it look like it's, say, darker. And then hopefully it tricks the eye into making it think that it is darker without making it look like, you know, it was like punched on the side. A little more yellow ochre, titanium white, a lot of paint. I want this base layer to be very thick. Remember that thicker paint tends to stick onto, thinner paint tends to stick onto thicker paint. So I want this to be very thick because I'm going to paint over it with synthetic brushes later on. Now I'm going to switch to the halftone brush. Going to take right from the color value web. Just like that. We're putting in the the side of the mandible. It's the ramus of the jaw, the little corner there. Now I'm going to switch to a different brush. I'm going to add a little bit of the mineral spirits onto this brush. A little bit of mineral spirits. Alizarin permanent. Burnt umber, just like the background, but a little cooler, so a little more burnt umber. Starting off with the top middle portion here. I'm sketching in the mouth. Now the key at this point, you're listening? The key is to have something that you can work with in terms of color and shape. Shape relative to the surroundings of each area. Color relative to your knowledge of your paint mixtures. I'm not making these colors overtly complicated, but rather I'm using these colors in a way that I can manipulate them. I can work with them and make the colors work for me. So there's my little blob for where the mouth is going to go. And see, now the shape is so workable. I can maneuver it however I want. I have the freedom to make something this vague into something that will be more specific later on. Now we're going to paint in this darker shadow. Now with the same type of idea, I'm going to go and put something in for the eyes. A little more mineral spirits. Ivory black. Alizarin permanent. Same here. See how much power I have in manipulating these shapes. Probably not the right word to use. In making these shapes do what I want them to do. And that's something that I can adjust. Don't need to stress about that too much. Now, of course, the old eyebrows. Brush stroke. Try to keep it as a brush stroke. Not because brush strokes look cool, though they do. It's for the functionality. Keep it simple so that you can adjust it. And now that we have all of this information, I realized I forgot the ear. So I'm going to go in with the middle tone brush. Whoops, I just smacked the microphone. My bad. So we're going to go in with the halftone. See, now I'm definitely going to use a value transition here. Whereas this one was color, and of course I'm going to do more for that. I'm going in with the value transition to make it appear that the form is now turning away from the light. And now we're going to switch to the light brush. Good old light brush. And we're going to put in a light for the earlobe. Just a brush stroke there to indicate that it is existing in space. Leave that be. And now I'm going to go ahead and put in more information into these shapes. Trying to make the shapes as accurate as possible. We're almost at our next cutscene, so I just want to show you how I'm going to go about approaching the painting during the cutscene. And remember, the cutscene is just there to not bore you with too much monotonous footage of me painting and not saying anything. Okay, so just like you're seeing there, I'm just going into each shape, not necessarily adding a whole lot of information. I'm just adjusting the light a little bit there. Hopefully that helped. I think that did. So it's not that I'm adding too much more information now. It's that I'm going to make the information that's there a little bit more usable. So for example, before we get into the cutscene, the nostril. So I have an angle here, and I'm just going to use the same value. See how I'm not adding that much more information, I'm just using the same value to help me draw the bottom portion of that plane. Alright, so now let's get into the cutscene. And we're back. So you have now seen the transition between the cutscenes. So in the last cutscene, sorry I say so a lot, but anyway, in the cutscene you can see I put so much more specificity into the few values that I have in place with each shape. I'm gonna continue with these camera angle motions to hopefully show you what I'm talking about with more clarity. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So each shape basically has around 3 values, 3 main values. You can even think of the whole thing 1, 2, 3. You can even think of the whole thing as split up into a few values. That's the important thing, especially with alla prima, to focus on grouping together those values and trying to make them as specific as possible. And again, we're going to continue to move the camera around. Hopefully this helps. Look at how compressed the value range is on the color value web. Now this episode is more about color, and in particular I want you to see how compressed the color value web is. It's not that every one of these mixtures is some kind of like chemical combination in order to get the right tone or anything like that. It's the same type of color combinations that I was introducing in the very beginning. The titanium white, yellow ochre, cadmium red, and then the ivory black. Primarily those type of colors, just in little moderations, little adjustments on the palette, little tiny mixtures such as this, combining these two colors here together to give me this little halftone. Now that I've explained that, the next step in the development of this painting is going to be getting into the smaller values. And in order to get into the smaller values, I need to pick an area and stick with it for a while. So I'm going to choose the eye over here. So I'm just making the edge a little bit softer. I'm setting the value for the concavity of the eye socket in place, and I'm going to very delicately adjust the edge for the eyebrow. I'm going to put a little bit more of this pinkish color to ensure that the color itself doesn't get too cold. And now going from general to specific, I'm going to put a plane change in here. So I'm introducing another value. Now with the color, what I want you to get out of this is how to use the color value web to your advantage. I know that you can get much more pure colors if you mix one spot at a time, but if you train yourself to use the color value web like I'm using here, you can make the mixture times much less, and you can have much more organization in your value families. So you'll be able to say like that, I want to move a couple steps lighter. See how this is a couple steps lighter than the surrounding flesh tones? I have the ability to gauge those jumps in value based off of the values that are on the palette. That's the key. And of course it needs to get a little more pink. And with the color value web, if you want to change the hue a little bit, you could put something over here. I tend to call them a rail. So like for instance, let's use a little bit of mineral spirits to clean off the brush. I can put a little warm rail here so it's warmer, and then automatically it'll get lighter as I move my way up. So that can just kind of rest. See this value band now? This can rest on the side of your color value web. And now I can use that for here. Now the point was to stick in this area, but of course I tend to get distracted and I'll move from one area to the other. So it's important to have the patience to stick with an area. A little bit more mineral spirits to clean off this brush. I'm now going to get a smaller one. I'm going to have a small dark brush. A little more mineral spirits. I'm actually going to start to use medium now. So I did tell you I would let you know. So the cup on the right has medium in it. It has Liquin. The Liquin has been there for, I think, a day now. Hopefully it didn't dry or settle in too much. Liquin is a fast dryer, so I'm going to have to be a little cautious. I should have put sand oil or something, like sand oil mineral spirits mix, but I was just lazy and used what I had. I typically like to use Liquin Original these days, though I prefer Neo McGilt. I just haven't been to the store in what seems like ages. Liquin just helps because it dries so fast. So gonna have to be conscientious of where I use it. And I'm using Ivory Black into the darker area of the palette now. So you may ask why I'm using medium, and it's important to talk about medium now because it does help with your coloring. So the medium helps to thin out the paint without using mineral spirits. So it helps to increase the flow of the paint, and it also manipulates the paint depending if it's a fast dryer or a slow dryer or something in between, but usually we just think of fast dryers and slow dryers. So the fast dryer, what it does, especially Liquin, it ensures that you have a touch dry painting in 24 hours or something like that. Now if I use too thick paint, it won't be touch dry in 24 hours. Though it doesn't matter if this is touch dry to me because this is an Alla Prima. But you get the point. So we're putting in the dark for the eye. Let's go ahead and throw that in the other side. Alright, now that I have the angle between the eyes and a little bit more information, though, there's a plane here that I could spell out a little better. And after I put in this plane, we'll move down towards the nose. Then I'll spend a little bit longer on the nose and the mouth, and then we'll do another cut scene. Just so I don't show too much monotonous stuff. And I always recommend working from life. Given the circumstances, I understand, you know, art studios are closed, social distancing and all that, we have to do our part. But if you're living at home with loved ones, you have loved ones around you, people close to you that would sit for you for painting like I did in last week's episode, I always suggest that over the photo reference. Photo reference is just it's a necessary thing for me, otherwise I can't paint. And I don't like to stare at myself, so I don't really enjoy self-portraits too much, so that's why I stick with photo reference. But anyway, I'm getting off topic with that. I'm trying to put in a mark for the nostril. Remember, thinner paint tends to stick onto thicker paint. So below here, I'm adding a little more mineral spirits. And since I'm doing a bunch of zooms with the camera, I'll zoom you in here so you can see what I'm talking about. Autofocus adjust. Sorry if the canvas is too grainy, but that's life. There's the nostril. Thinner paint sitting on top of thicker paint. That's how you paint wet onto wet. It's a very effective way of layering oil paint. I'm gonna do it again. Hopefully you can see it better with the close-up. See how the paint is sticking? And that's how you layer wet into wet oil color. Now everything is going to look a little strange when you first introduce new information like this. It's not going to automatically work like magic, one brushstroke at a time. You usually place something down, you step back, and then you reason with it. Is it working? Is it not working? And if it isn't working, how can I adjust it? And in terms of color, I'm just going to make it a little more pink. See how I'm using the rail on the side now? Now we're going to move on down towards the mouth. I'm going to use the same type of mixture. Alizarin permanent, ivory black. Now I like to work in this progression. Eyes, gauge the distance. Nose, gauge the distance again. Mouth. And that's just because the mouth, as you're about to see now, is much easier to move. I'm actually going to move the mouth up a little bit, starting with the top middle portion of the mouth. So starting with the top middle portion, place the top middle portion of the mouth down, step back, ask yourself, does it fit the storyline that you're putting in here? Does it fit the center line? Does it match with the face? That's where I went wrong last week. I messed that one up last week. So I wasn't paying attention. I was in a little more fear. I was a little more fearful with that painting. So I missed this very important part. Center of the eyes. Follow the center line. Follow the center line. Bottom of the nose. Follow that center line. This is the philtrum. Does this match with the center line of the face? And if it does, leave it. You have two things here. You have the center of the mouth, the placement of the center of the mouth, and then the distance that the mouth makes with respect to the bottom of the nose. So this is about all right. It could get a little closer. And that's just small, tiny brush stroke of a difference. Do you want to know exactly how small? As I drop all of my materials, I'll show you how small with this little device. How small is it? I want to say that this is the length right here. That's small. Let's fix the autofocus so you can see. Come on, autofocus. There you go. 7.4 millimeters. There it is. 7.4 millimeters. And let me press the little 0 button here. Suppose I wanted to adjust it. And in fact, I think I do need to adjust it a little bit higher. So this is the original. A little bit higher. Now what's that adjustment gonna be? So tiny. 1.3 millimeters. That's how small these adjustments are. Remember in the beginning I said that I didn't want the head to be too small? That's why. That 1.3 millimeter would have been like in plank length, like so tiny if I made the face any smaller. There. tiniest little adjustments. And that's so much more fun, I think, in my opinion, to find that out in the painting than to trace it or something, than to trace the outlines from a picture and then just already have that answered. So let's adjust the camera angle here. And I'm going to adjust the mouth a little bit more, and then I'm going to go into cutscene. So I'm just drawing the shape of the mouth a little better. Now a little more mineral spirits. Alizarin permanent, ivory black. We'll put the shadow in here. Here's a shadow giving me the partition of the lips. Now the model is clearly wearing lipstick, so that's why the lips are extremely dark. But even with lipstick or makeup, you can still search out form. In this case, light and shadow. Sorry. All right, let's go in the cutscene. And we're back. So as you're seeing here, let's get the zoom in to the face. So again, we have added a few more values. See how it's still, not that much information. Like highlight is a new thing now. Highlight, middle tone, dark lights. So the progression went from, remember, first it was 3 values in each area. Now it's about 5 or 7 values per area. You can count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, give or take. Values in each area, even less, I guess you can see there in the ear and for the mandible. The main thing is that those shapes of color related to one another, which is what conveys the sense of form. Now, since this episode was mainly about color, I didn't focus too much on the initial drawing, nor did I focus too much on the rendering. I can make separate videos to talk more in depth about those things. So let's just finish off this old painting here with the hair. I did say that I would come back to the hair, so I waited a little bit as I was painting. Now, with the hair, I'm going to go back to the darkest dark. Remember, this was one of the first marks that I put into the development of this painting. Something really neat happened here. Let's do some more zooming in, since we're zooming in a lot. Sorry about my pinky marks over there, but anyway. The odorless mineral spirits dripped and then settled in and created this very nice, almost like watercolor type of vignette. And I usually will like to leave a vignette in the painting. Remember, a vignette is just the area in the painting that you leave unfinished to complement the areas that are more finished. I'm just covering my pinky marks there. So I'll leave the dripping stuff. And of course, like I said, I'm not going to paint the hand because I don't feel like it. If you want to see how I painted the hand, you can check out my Instagram page where I have the larger version of this painting. Still a work in progress, but at least in that one I did paint the hands. So we're going to put in just a little brush stroke there for the shoulder. Not too much, just so I don't have too much of a floating head there. Alright, so now let's put in some more darks. There are some clips in her hair, but I don't think I want to put in the highlights from the clips. So I think I'm going to just put in some dark accents for the hair, and then maybe a little more for the background before calling it done. I'm leaving the burnt umber here to show through a little more, just because I like the way that looks when you can see influence of the umber sketch. So in the future, people can see the painting and kind of see through the layers, which I think is pretty neat. Now with the same old brush, let's just add a few more little traces for the background. I'll put a little bit of Liquin. The Liquin is in the cup below here. So a little bit of Liquin just so the paint can move freely. Odorless mineral spirits, but not too much. And by the way, I've been using a microfiber cloth. I usually use paper towel, but actually been running out of paper towel, so I use microfiber cloth. And then when the odorless mineral spirits kind of dries or evaporates into the air, I just clean the microfiber cloth and continue to work in that way without using too much paper towel. So let's cover the top a little bit, and I'm going to leave some of the brush strokes to show through. And as I'm filling in the background, let me reiterate the objectives for today's episode. Now that you've seen most of the episode, remember in the beginning it was all about the umber sketch, choosing the right color to do your drawing. It was important. I chose the burnt umber. You can choose raw umber or any of the other neutral browns. They're usually pretty good for drawing, just so that they don't interact with the flesh tones too much. And then when we moved into the flesh tones, I introduced a very basic concept of the most simple type of flesh tone you can make with the titanium white, the yellow ochre, and the cadmium red, and the ivory black. And then from there I introduced the color value web, as you see here. Even throughout the end I stuck with the color value web. I explained the usage of the color value web and how to have different value transitions and hue transitions and keep your colors as organized as possible. Excuse my English there, but anyway, using the palette itself to help you organize the values. And then I subdivided the values and even explained those value separations. Remember, first it was 3 values for the flesh tones, then it was 5 to 7 values, which is where we're ending off with the face. Now the last final touches that I'll do, just little minute things. So let's get the camera zoomed in a little bit, say to about, I guess to about here, and show you what I'm going to do now with a clean and dry synthetic brush. I'm just looking for edges such as that edge there that I wouldn't want to be too sharp. So I'm taking some attention away from edges that are just a little too sharp for their own good. So this one here. Now let's take the zoom back to regular. Hopefully the little zoom, the zooming in and out helped. So again, with the clean and dry synthetic brush, just make this edge a little bit softer. And I think that ought to do it. A few more little touches there. That ought to do it. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that these videos are helping you out. If you would like to see more painting videos like this one, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you would like to support this channel even more and have the opportunity to have constructive critiques and watch live stream painting demonstrations, I have a Patreon account where you can help support this channel even more. Links to that will be in the description box down below. I wish you all the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one. And it's now time for our new patron shout out. So thank you so much, Nikki Nunn. Thank you so much for becoming a patron on my Patreon account. Your support helps me out so much. Your support means the world to me. It enables me to continue to pursue the development of these videos. Thank you so much. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.